The following is a conversation with Dave Stevens, CEO at ArrantaBio, a contract development manufacturing organisation focused on supporting innovators and pioneers advancing novel and advanced therapies for the benefit of patients all around the world. ArrantaBio has an interest in microbiome therapies and supports many of the leading microbiome companies globally. This is Inside Matters. My name is Dr. James McElroy. I hope you enjoy it. You're looking good. Running a company and staying in shape is not easy.
So it's dead easy, right? So just get up in the morning, black coffee, start working.
That's it.
And actually I've been good at getting up early, even this week, and going for a run or going and doing some weights.
And that's post-travel.
Yeah.
That's really good.
It's the secret to getting over the jet lag.
Train.
Yeah. And then I don't eat all day. And then at night time, I eat a ton.
You eat a ton.
Yeah.
But you're still losing weight. Oh, I eat a ton every meal.
Yeah.
But I'm training like a madman all the time. The guy who was here last week, Andy Scot, he trains me. And it's really humbling.
Uh-huh.
I think I'm training hard when I'm training by myself. And then I have a session with Andy. And within 10 minutes, I feel like I'm done.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. But you just go more.
Yeah. No rest, no wandering around looking at your phone.
No phones allowed, man.
Yeah.
No. You can't even look at your phone.
So I do. I've got a Peloton in my basement. Peloton
That's
tread.
the bike, right?
Yeah. And then on the screen, I do the Peloton workouts. And there's like
are they
15 seconds between sets.
Do you do this fasted?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it's brutal.
That is brutal.
Right? Because your muscles have the
is
glycogen
brutal.
are depleted already.
Wow.
So, yeah. I mean,
do you have a gym on site at Arranta?
There is one down at the 480. I never go there. I work out at home every morning.
Right. Just get it done.
The basement.
Just get it done.
American basement.
The sweaty basement, yeah.
10, it was only when we got the house built, it was only part of the house that was done properly. And I'm okay if my builder Steve hears this, because he should hear
Steve,
this.
Shout out.
The only thing that was built, and actually my wife said, how come the only thing in this house right is your area with the gym, the bar, and the golf sim? And it is pretty nice.
So a proper man cave.
Yeah.
You got the gym, you got the bar. Yeah, that sounds really good. Tell me, what do you do at Arranta for well-being? What are your initiatives? And conscious, of course, that you're aware of what we do at EnteroBiotix, and I'm trying to make it best in class, to use the Mark Bamforth phraseology.
Yeah.
So
you should patent best in class.
Mark, Mark's probably the best CDMO entrepreneur on the planet.
Yeah.
But he loves the phraseology best in class, doesn't he?
He's got
trademark it.
Well, so pretty good apprentice though.
Oh well, for me and you, yeah.
Everyone now goes, look, there's a young Scottish guy that worked with Mark, and Mark can do anything he likes now, but
he's keeping busy.
Really,
busy.
He is, and he's a really
him and Morag.
He's just a good human being,
right?
And I'm sure we can talk about, but when I moved on from a previous CDMO, that's what I was looking for. I was looking for a values-driven organisation, something we could build from the ground up. The culture, the people. I think as you get older, it's less about like what you do, it's how you do what you're doing, and the people you work with and how you're doing it. You want to go home at the end of the week and feel like you're proud of what you're doing, and I think that's what Mark does. I do joke, he's definitely self-actualized. He's in a position to do whatever he wants. For me, there's still a bit of food, water, shelter I want to do, but
likewise.
No, I think it was a brilliant experience. But for those things, we have a head of CSR,
right?
And she's constantly organising those things, and it's tough. And you know this, right? It's in a startup environment.
Is Arranta still a startup? You got that mentality.
So we tried to outlaw that,
right?
Because we're not a startup anymore. It's 2.5 years, 3 years. But I think you'll see this, right? As soon as you start jumping into GMP,
right,
then you realise you're a startup, because you're running through constant mistakes. And so if you think about like a company that's been in business for 10 years and made 100 batches, GMP batches, they've already ironed out a lot of the problems.
Right.
We're running into all of the problems, and the team's really smart and we're working through those things. But I don't think there's a shortcut. And I think we're learning extremely quickly. And I think 5 years from now, it'll be incredible. But today, when your first few batches, the machines don't work exactly how you anticipated. So I think all of those things make it a really difficult place to work. And I feel sorry for the manufacturing guys. We often do, we do a summer picnic. Guess what? The GMP guys are in manufacturing. There's nothing you can do about that. We've got clients who've got patients that are waiting on product. So, and they get that, but they're working incredibly hard. And the microbiome for fermented products it's tough. It's a new platform. Bugs don't grow. They're not like monoclonals. They don't grow exactly how you expect them to all the time. So stuff can need harvested at 2 a.m. and you expect it to be 10 a.m. Right. So the team's got to be there the whole time. I'm immensely proud of the hard work that the folks do.
We'll talk about the microbiome and the challenges, but let's go back to basics. So you mentioned Arranta as a CDMO.
Yep.
What is a CDMO?
Contract Development Manufacturing Organisation. I think the easiest way to think about this, we're a service business that does science. And, first and foremost, we're not making products ourselves. We're helping people develop and then scale up and then hopefully take their products through clinical supply and hopefully commercialization. And what's fascinating about microbiome, because it's a new modality, more than any, and I've worked, I've led companies at large portfolios of sterile manufacturing clients. What's really interesting is how indexed we are to our clients' success for microbiome. If there's only, I know there's probably about 400 innovators in the world working on it, but there's probably
400 companies.
Yeah.
Right.
We reckon, but there's probably 20 credible companies that are, going through the clinic. And I think we're sort of invested in making sure that they're successful, because if they get to phase 2, guess what? They're bringing the batches back to us.
Right.
But it's a really difficult, and I'm sure you see this, right? And you talk to investors, there's no commercial products. Everybody's waiting on the first one. The first one's probably going to be an FMT product. We're typically working on the fermented products. And so a lot of the science, what's really, I think is fascinating about the microbiome. Everything about treating the microbiome is intuitively sensible. It's just that correlation versus causation thing, and how do you prove the mechanism of action when 90% of your T cells are in your GI tract. So why wouldn't you be able to modulate other parts of your body by controlling the gut bacteria that modulates that?
Right.
It makes complete sense.
Right.
The problem is, it's not something you inject. And then they've got that sort of overhang of probiotics that makes people feel like it's a commodity. It's not.
Yeah.
I think in the next 10 years, I think there'll be huge leaps forward on the microbiome. And I think there's just so much evidence that the microbiome is important. And I talked about this before, intermittent fasting.
Right. What's that doing to your microbiome?
For 10 years, for as long as I could remember, I had heartburn every single day of my life. My mum has Barrett's esophagus. It's a hereditary condition where I think your esophagus is a little tighter than it needs to be. Every day of my life I had heartburn. Since I started intermittent fasting.
Sorry to cut you off, but that must have sucked.
Oh, it was brutal.
Terrible. Yeah.
Zantac every single day.
Yeah, and you mentioned your black coffee. That must have triggered it. And
black coffee, wine, eggs.
Curry.
Everything.
Yeah. All the good stuff, man.
All the stuff that I now gorge on.
As a Scottish boy, not being able to have a curry, struggling with the beer, no harm to the Scottish boys. I know some of us drink green juice and do yoga and such like, but that's kind of a staple, isn't it?
100%. Haggis, scrambled eggs. Yeah. I'm going away this weekend with my buddies. We do a golf tournament every year, and we're all going away, and typically it'll be a few beers tonight or tomorrow night. Yeah. In the morning it will be eggs, bacon, heartburn by the afternoon.
There we go.
So, but when I started to intermittent fast, there was a couple of things happened. One, inflammation. I did used to work out quite a bit. I had sore wrists, shoulders and things. Disappeared over the course of the few months. I never get heartburn now. I can literally drink whiskey, wine, eat whatever I want in the evening and go to bed, nothing. Wow. It's incredible. And so I couldn't...
Such a simple change. You just don't eat for a period of time. And
Yep.
do you do a 16/8 or do you do a longer fast now?
I'm pretty hardcore now. I do
24?
Like 24.
24. So for those listening, that's 20-hour fast, 4-hour feed. So you're basically eating your full caloric intake.
Correct.
In 4 hours.
And I do a pretty good job of it.
I'm sure you do.
I had a massive Indian with my parents last night, but my wife does it as well. She's probably a bit more sensible, like 16/8.
In terms of longevity, and so there's lifespan. You're born, you die. Then there's health span. How long between those two dates are you healthy for? Right? And there's various different things that we think we might be able to do to increase our lifespan. And there's also things that we think we can do to increase our health span. And the two things that reproducibly are shown to enhance health span and lifespan in animal models are essentially intermittent fasting, so calorie restriction, so time restricted or significant calorie restriction. And the other is a drug called rapamycin, we should have a look at, and we might do a podcast episode on it. But I do wonder that if in addition to helping you control your weight through controlling your calories, there's some other benefits there as well. Improved insulin sensitivity, maybe your inflammatory markers, and you're just a bit of touch on that coming down, the indigestion thing. So maybe it's a microbiome thing.
I think it's 100% a microbiome. I think it gives your body a chance. I think as soon as you start eating carbohydrates, your body goes from recovery to just dealing with what you're putting in. I think you give your kidneys a rest. I think you give your blood a rest. I think there's all sorts of benefits that I don't think are well understood. And
it's life-changing for you.
Yeah, for me it was. I mean, the first 2 weeks were painful.
I'm sure, yeah.
It was like starving. It was like going cold turkey. I was sitting cold, tired. But now I don't think about it. And like I work out every morning. I go for a run, empty stomach. I don't think about food.
Amazing.
And it's also, I think it's interesting. I think from an evolutionary perspective, that's what cavemen did. They went out each day. They had to go find their food, and then they ate in the evening.
They ate and they slept.
It sort of makes sense. I think before there was a lot of false hunger. I would eat, and then I'd be thinking about my next meal. But now I just don't think about it.
It could be the bugs telling us that we're hungry.
There you go.
Through some means. Possibly.
I would also tell you that my wife, by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, says she just avoids me because I'm a bit grumpy. But but no, I sleep better. For me, it's amazing. It's a good choice, and
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the CDMO piece and your role at ArrantaBio.
Yeah.
So ArrantaBio specialises in biologics and like novel modalities, is that right?
I would say, yeah, advanced platforms, advanced medicinal products. So the sort of the new ways of treating disease. So we're focused on microbiome, so modulating the human microbiome by, manipulating the live bacteria in the gut microbiome. mRNA, so messenger RNA, and actually it's slightly broader than that. We're working on other products, including siRNA, but essentially nucleic acids based, so plasmids, mRNA, and not mRNA in the way people have heard it. And
because of the vaccine.
Yeah, community vaccines. We're not really focused on it. I mean, if somebody came to us and say, make us a community vaccine, we'd look at it. But I think that for mRNA, the promise is really around therapeutics and also vaccines for oncology. You think about some of the really tough to treat things like pancreatic cancer. One of the challenges with the
huge unmet need, right?
Yeah,
massive unmet need.
The body can't identify that tumor, so it doesn't have the wherewithal to sort of attack the cells in the pancreatic cancer. What's interesting about what I think is fascinating about mRNA is you sequence the tumor, develop something to sort of trigger the protein expression in the body to specifically go after that gene sequence of that tumor. It's just really cool.
Super cool.
And I've known about mRNA for probably 10 years. And I was sort of nudging Mark when we first got together, we should look at mRNA. And of course, then the COVID hit, and now it doesn't look such a novel idea, but it's an incredibly difficult supply chain.
Why is it so difficult?
So there's so many different sources of that. You need plasmid from one place. You need somewhere to make the IVT reaction. You've got this interesting sort of combination of biology and chemistry, all the way through to the lipid nanoparticle, which is being dissolved basically by ethanol to precipitate out the nanoparticles. It's really complicated. You need special facilities, handling requirements for that ethanol quantity, and then the sterile fill finish. And what was brilliant, and this is what I take my hat off to Mark about, was we talk about those challenges, and I've been in other companies where we talk about those challenges. You go, yeah, that's a big challenge, all those different things. How do you get them into one site? Well, here, when we talked about it, Mark was like, let's do it. Let's take that to the board. And now I think we're one of the very few companies that can basically do all of that within 3,000 square feet in GMP.
And just for the listener, explain why that's such a big deal. And I think at the most basic level, it's you're working with steriles.
Yep.
Which contain no viable microorganisms.
Yeah.
And then at the other end, you've got your microbiome products, and your ethos is we need to preserve the cells. And what you're saying is they're in the same facility. So how is that the challenge, or maybe I got it wrong?
So there's lots of challenges, but I think what was, and we talked a bit about Ian Baird before, but I think sort of Ian Baird's genius was the way he set the facility up. We had it. The facility in Massachusetts in wartime was deliberately set up with engineering controls in place that we could handle any type of single-use biologic platform. And he did that by...
That's a big vision, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a big vision.
13 clean rooms, all unidirectional flow, the air handling systems, like 50-odd. The decontamination that we have, we've got VHP capabilities in every single suite. We can isolate those suites. The way the facility is set up, we can control and basically eliminate the possibility of cross-contamination between products. It's just...
So one of the design principles must have been like maximum flexibility.
Exactly.
Minimum downtime, that kind of stuff.
All single use. So,
yeah.
And what's really neat about that is no cleaning methods. You just say, no, it's all single use. We take any of the product contact parts away, they're gone, and we replace it, and we can decontaminate the suites. But yeah, no, that's, and so, plasmid is E. coli based. The microbiome can be anything, including spore formers.
And they can be tricky, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, they can. And in most facilities, it's funny because I used to run steriles, and anyone would come to us with a spore form or a bacteria, we'd be like, we can't.
Where did you run the steriles? Was this in Scotland?
I was, I had a site in Glasgow, which I took over there 2013, which I worked with Sarah.
Right.
Your Sarah.
Right.
And we, what's cool about that business, I'm really, really proud of what we did. It was a business that had been around for 10 years, never made $1 of profit. It was really neat. They were pioneers in lyophilization to stabilize drugs. And we were able to basically take that site from losing money to becoming, AMRI's most profitable business when they acquired it. And
what did you do to drive that? I mean, that's a great outcome.
Yeah.
What were your principles, and how did you build the business?
So it was I was desperate to run a business myself, and I remember sort of being in a meeting where they were sort of saying, what do we do with this site in Scotland? I actually was in the US at the time, and I sort of wasn't meant to be in the meeting. I just stuck my hand up and said, if you're going to do something with it, can I just have a shot at running it? And I got an opportunity to run it. And I had lots of ideas, full of enthusiasm. And it's funny, I look back now and I realise how much I didn't know at the time. I think it's one of
that's one of the things, though, isn't it?
But I had this complete fire in my belly to go make something happen. And I spent there was about 60 employees at the site at the time, and I remember spending the first week, I met with everybody for an hour, every single person, and just asked them about themselves and what they saw. And it was really really powerful, because I sort of got to know people really quickly, and I was able to sort of come up with some ideas about how we fixed it. But I think the core tenet was sort of deploying continuous improvement, Lean Six Sigma, looking at pricing, looking at the market, and sort of matching up our capabilities. So it was everything. We looked at the commercial side, the operational side, but I just remember driving in every day just immensely excited about what we were doing. And I do remember, I actually still have the charts, but we were like negative EBITDA, and it started to go positive, and it went positive.
Wow.
And
that felt good.
It was incredible, and the momentum, and I think I think we did lots of like pizza things. We brought food in for folks.
Not green juice.
Not green juice.
We do pizza at ArrantaBio too sometimes.
I had no awareness of the microbiome back then. But no, it was just an amazing experience. And I think one of the things we sort of reset expectations for what the site could be, but also what people could expect of their careers.
What they could do.
And we changed a lot of things. But no, it was a phenomenal experience. And I would say probably the most enjoyable part of my career.
To date.
Because it was just exciting. We didn't have much money for investment, so I was beg stealing and borrowing. I was asking Scottish Enterprise for help, and but no, it was as soon as we started to see clients coming in, and it was perfectly positioned. It was steriles. Most products now need to be, and they're moving towards injectables. They're either poorly soluble, poorly bioavailable. It just needed some help, but also just resetting ambitions. And yeah,
you mentioned that it was a US company, but with a Scottish site, UK site.
Yeah.
Now you're running a business in the US, Boston.
Yeah.
What are the differences between business in the US and business in Scotland? And you can talk about mindsets people have, access to capital, culture, expectations, that kind of thing.
I think it's across all of those things. I think it's a Scot. So at one point I wanted to buy that facility, and I tiptoed around it. I regret that to this day, because we could have bought that business and taken it on ourselves. I think this just, and this is why I take my hat off to what you've done, right? I think in the US, the natural mindset is to shoot for the stars, right?
That's it.
And Mark Banfield and I have talked about this. When people go to do a capital raise in the US, they're going, I want a capital raise for the next 4 years, 5 years, because I'm going to take this and it's going to be $1 billion company. And they go out and ask for those things. Now, some of that's access to capital in the US is easier. Here, people go out and ask for 500,000, right? And it gets and basically they're in a sort of perennial raising money, and that ends up where that's the job rather than growing the business and focusing on that. I don't know if it's
right.
I think it's just a smaller goldfish bowl here, and I think when I was about 21, I had a boss, like an Australian guy called Glenn Kirchhoff, and I said to him many times thanks, but he stretched my imagination for what was possible. I remember sort of grabbing me and saying, "Hey, what do you want to do?" And he was basically saying, "You can do anything." And at the time, I'm going, "Yeah, sure." It's easy for you to say, but actually, I think people set their own limitations in Scotland to a much greater extent than they do in the US.
Right.
I think the level of aspiration in the US is higher.
Massively.
Yeah.
Massively. I find that there's some incredible people in Scotland, and we're a very innovative country with an incredible history of creating globally dominant technologies.
Yep.
But I feel like you go to an American VC, you go to a Scottish investor first, and they're sort of looking at the financials and go, it's quite risky, and you need to spend that much. In America, it's like, how are you going to crush all of the competition? How are you going to do that? Yeah. Tell me how you're going to do that. How are you going to scale faster than anybody else?
Yeah.
How are you going to change the world? And how are you going to make me lots of money?
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's that competitiveness. It's the let's be the biggest, let's be the best, let's be the fastest, let's do it now, let's do it yesterday. And that mentality we don't seem to have much of in Scotland.
I think it's
people here
really
that are doing it.
No, I mean, my 5-year-old, 10-year-old, the school in the US, it's sort of taught into them as a naturally competitive environment. But even when you look at the way that the colleges operate with the scholarships and things, it's like a pyramid. It's just driving people towards. And I'm not, there's some negatives on that as well for certain. But it's definitely, as a society, it's a much more ambitious society, and
it is, isn't it?
And
it celebrates success differently.
Yeah.
So an academic in the UK patents something phenomenal. They license it out. It becomes a new drug. They come to work in a Ferrari. Everyone's like, ooh, that's a bit much, isn't it?
Yeah.
Show off. Whereas in the US, it's like, yes, it's like That is the American dream. You go, Professor so-and-so. I want to be just like you when I grow up, kind of thing. So I think it's a societal thing, but we do have some amazing entrepreneurs here. Amazing entrepreneurs. And I commend Scottish enterprise and all these organisations who are trying to help catalyse the innovation. I guess one of the other challenges as well is that when companies here start to scale big, there is not the capital base to support them, become huge. Yeah. That's why we don't have, many unicorns, like a private company worth more than $1 billion. Whereas in the US, you've got incredible access to capital. Yep. And those big ideas are the ones that people want to talk about. So there's like a lot we can do here to...
No, it's funny. So I don't intend to live my days out in the US.
Forever.
No, I do want to come back to Scotland. I think it's interesting. I've lived in Italy. I've lived in the US, but there's something pretty unique about Scottish
something special,
people.
Man. Yeah, something special. There is something special.
There's just an honesty, a transparency that you and I'm not suggesting there's other places don't have that, but as I was in Tesco in Maryhill Tuesday buying my toiletries
why were you doing that? Nothing, no harm.
We had to visit Sarah's mum,
right?
And I need to buy some toiletries, and it was just up the road. So Sarah and I ran up there. We left the wee guy down with Sarah's mum, and we're going down the conveyor belt out of the place, and on the wall it had support. There's a giant sign: support, YER community. And that's just Scottish people, right? And so it's funny, actually, said then I had a debate and so he goes, oh, look at that, that's the Scottish humour. And I said, well, it is, or maybe that's the manager just spelt it wrong. Right. But like, there's something really sincere and honest about Scottish people. And I do, I miss obviously miss my family, miss my friends, but just there's something just uniquely simple and
So I become the First Minister and I appoint Dave Stevens to manage all life sciences. How do we turn Scotland into the life sciences capital of the world?
Oh, that's a tough question.
And just to say, someone asked me this morning and I've got an answer on my phone. So we'll see, let's talk through it and see what you think. You tell me first, what would you do?
So,
and we've tapped into all the good and the great and we've got billions, we've got so much money and we can become incredible, but we need your leadership, Dave. What are we going to do?
I think, so it's an interesting challenge. So I was actually at one point I was on a Pharma steering committee for life sciences that reported into Scottish Enterprise. I think what I saw, and it's not a criticism, I felt at the time that there was some amount of money that was investable each year. And what I saw was they were sort of spreading it across.
Spraying it across.
Right. Yeah. And it's like similar when you run a business. Of course, there's 1,000 things you could improve. But you've sort of got to narrow it down and sort of figure out where you get the biggest bang for the buck. And so it's really about figuring out how you get that greatest ROI. And I'm not sitting here and saying I know where those things are necessarily, but it struck me a couple of things. One, there was a lot of money going to big companies that candidly could probably afford to support themselves. Two, I thought there was some promising companies that were sort of getting nudged forward as opposed to getting genuine. So for me at the time, and I'll tell you why I was frustrated at the time, there was things I could have done to dramatically accelerate the growth of the business in Glasgow, but I needed capital, which, like $2 million I could have turned into another 100 people. I think just being a bit more thoughtful on how you direct that and get the greatest bang for the buck. I think that's probably, if you have infinite money, of course you can spray it. But for me, that's just good business sense is to make sure you prioritize.
Right. Bet big on the winners, right?
Yes.
Give them some juice and let them just scale.
Yeah.
Because I think we do like to, and I say we, I'm speaking on behalf of an organisation I don't represent now, but there does seem to be a lot of small ticket funding that gets distributed across a large number of companies.
Yep.
There's also this funder of last resort piece where it's like, come to us if you can't raise money from anyone else.
Right.
surely the best companies are going to get the money, and you want to get in with the best companies and give them more juice. What do you think about this? So this is what I said. I said, point number 1, build incredible manufacturing and laboratory infrastructure.
Yeah.
Shortage across the UK, and there needs to be somewhere for scale-up companies to go. Like, space is at a premium. So the space that exists that's high quality is very expensive.
Yep.
And the more resourced companies will be able to nudge in and muscle in. And this is a problem across the UK, not just Scotland. I said offer incentives to companies to stay there long term. Mm-hmm. So like amortise fit-out costs over the course of a long-term lease. Lobby the universities really hard for more favourable spin-out terms. There's no reason why we can't have the most favourable terms in the whole world in Scotland. Yep. Let's not have a battle between the academic founders, the lead investor and the university about who gets what and anti-dilution preference and stuff like that.
That's actually an interesting one, because I talked to an academic recently, and so in the US, it's even the academic institutions are commercial, right? They're like, let's go.
Let's do it.
Here it's like, I want to help, but you got to fund a PhD and got to fill this Pharma, and it's just complicated, and it's not. I think it's just not. It's just not conducive to sort of springing forward.
Right, I agree. We should be doing whatever we possibly can to get the innovation that's in these universities, or even in someone's head, that might become a paper or might become a patent. No, let's give you some money to do the de-risking, and then file for a patent, build a company, and then get the publications out. Let's just make it happen.
And there's examples in the US that make kind of no sense. Like Florida University, like we had a facility down there, and Mark had a facility in his previous company there. The amount of entrepreneurship that's coming out of that university is just unbelievable. It's just dozens and dozens of companies that are getting spun out from there, and
that's amazing.
I mean, yeah.
That's incredible.
There's case studies to look at about how is that happening.
I think the Scotland now has a chief entrepreneur.
I saw that.
Name's Mark Logan. I think he's doing something at the moment on this. Okay. So hopefully it's life sciencey. We need a life science element. It can't just be coders and technology. No harm to them, but we need to make sure there's a life science piece to it as well. So,
and there's great universities.
Maybe get him on here. Oh, fantastic universities, some of the best in the whole world. Yeah. So I will bring it back now to ArrantaBio and microbiome. So you mentioned the microbiome's challenging. You mentioned we haven't had an approval yet, but what's your gut telling you about an approval? We're kind of close, aren't we?
I think it's really close.
Feeling close.
I think the FMT products will be the first gen that's out there.
Mark, could you try to pull up Ferring Probiotics FDA advisory committee meeting, because I think that that's scheduled now for September. So let Mark try and find that. Yeah, the Ferring, Ferring, Rebiotics, Rebiotics, FDA Advisory Committee. Because I think it's really soon. I think it's September the 20-somethings. And if that's favourable, then we'll be moving closer towards our first approval. Oh, there we go. That's it. There we go. So September the 22nd. So that's like the next stage gate before an approval. That's, I think, publicly viewable. There it is there. The FDA live streams it. So clearly, if that goes well, and Ceres, who are in phase 3, they've announced that they're submitting or imminently about to be submitting for the BLA. If these go well and they start to sell and patients start getting better, then we should see increased confidence in the microbiome.
Yeah.
Because I feel like everybody knows the microbiome is important. Well, actually, one of the reasons for doing this podcast is because not everybody knows, but people know it's important.
Yeah.
And even if they don't know the microbiome is specifically important, they know that, for example, if I eat salad and fruit and vegetables most of the time for a couple of months, I'm going to feel better.
Yeah.
And why is that? Well, it's microbiome. So they know, but they don't really know. But I think the investors, and you mentioned it earlier, I got it written down. You mentioned correlation, causation. Yep. So the investors and people can see that there's a link, but they're not sure what it is. So what do we need to do to to increase investor confidence?
So, I think the analytics around that correlation causation will improve, like everything, right? I'm sure we'll look back on some of these challenges in 10 years and go, wow, that was like leaching.
One of the questions I've got for you is, how important is analytical?
Yeah.
It's fundamental, or?
That's just, for LBPs, it's massive. For LBP, I mean, even
so LBP, live biotherapeutic product, yeah.
So even there's gains to be had. Viable cells, it's incredibly manual to do that right now. I think there's lots of opportunities to improve the analytics that go alongside it. I think that the microbiome is just, I think there's a couple of milestones that I see which will transform it. And I think one of the challenges, it's like when you talk about that, you can achieve some of this by eating more fermented foods. Sure. But I think pharmaceutical grade probiotic, pharmaceutical grade microbiome products have the possibility to transform that. I think it's just tough. You compare that to like a gene therapy product that cures like an eye illness or cystic fibrosis. Like investors can get that. There's a barrier to compete. Whereas I think when you think about a microbiome product, they hear. I think there's still lack of understanding. It's funny, when we bring on really smart people, we still have to educate them on what it is we're doing and why it's important. People don't understand why the microbiome is important. They don't understand the therapeutic benefits that go beyond C. difficile to, ALS, Alzheimer's. There's all sorts of things that, all disease starts in the gut.
Right. And Hippocrates. Shout out.
Yeah. And I think when you start telling people that, they get excited. And I think for investors, I think they're still trying to figure out, how do you make sure you create a sufficiently differentiated product that someone else can't just come along and do that? And some of that's going to be on improved formulations. But we're still sort of at this, it feels like a little bit like gene therapy like 20 years ago, where people were still trying to puzzle this stuff out. And I think over time, people will figure this out. Again, there's just so much evidence. I get these journal articles sent to me, and it's, one of my favorite things is that, there's less depression in children who grow up with a dog in the house. Wow. So adulthood depression is lower in people who have a dog, and it's because the dog creates a more diversified microbiome. Their gut bacteria is more diversified. Wow. There's just so much. I just think, to me, it's just fascinating. And
I didn't know that.
There's loads like incredible. That. And there's studies on rats with depression and transplanting a depressed rat's microbiome into a non-depressed and the impact that has. It's to me, that's just fascinating. And and I think the milestones along the way will be FMT will get approved for C. difficile. The next one will be a fermented product gets approved, probably for a GI indication. And
the fermented product is your specialty at Arranta. So talk to us about the difference between like an FMT product and then a fermented product, and why you've gone big in the fermented arena, so to speak. Or
I think, this is my feeling. I think in the future, I think the FMT products will prove concept for sure. And I think there is something with that full spectrum of, there's an interplay that I still don't think is understood, right? There's fungi and there's all sorts of other stuff that's in there that I don't think it's well understood, right? And there's we've seen some analytical data on, you need certain strains for other strains to propagate. There's an interplay between certain strains, that certain strains produce metabolites that the other strains need. There's a lot of that stuff. And so I think FMT, will be the first in class treatment for a lot of these things. And I think that's...
So a donor-derived product. The starting material is stool. It's been rigorously screened from healthy people. And you're trying to retain the ecosystems as best as possible, right? And you mentioned the various different elements there. Do you think a fermented product, can you achieve the same kind of complexity? Or you can achieve enough?
Well, yeah, so I think there's a number of different ways to think about that. I think there's different ways you can go. One of the nice things about being a CDMO, and I want to make sure I don't talk about any one specific product, but
no problem.
We get to see lots of different approaches. We even get to people come to us and say, hey, we're thinking about this thing. How do you think about it? How would you manufacture that? But there's other ways to approach this, which is things like, bring in, consortia together, bring 50 different strains together, either make 50 different drug substances, which would be difficult from a COGS perspective, or could you co-culture them together? Is there other ways? Could you do something where you have a background of FMT, use that as a scaffold or an excipient,
right,
something like that,
right,
and then focus on 2 or 3 bugs,
right?
I think there's a lot of different directions it can still go in,
right?
And for me, it's just, I think there's some data out there that says that certain strains of bacteria supplement with a frontline oncology treatment improves the
Incredible.
Responsiveness. To me, it's just a matter of time.
I saw some data recently, still unpublished. I can't go into all the detail, but
Yeah.
FMT or IMT, intestinal microbiota transfer, however you want to describe it, as an adjuvant treatment in patients who are receiving immunotherapy. And the data was incredible. I got really excited, both because I'm running a microbiome company, but also with my clinician and sort of just human hats on. I was like, oh my goodness, if we can achieve like the disappearance of cancer cells in a significant proportion of patients and also shift non-responders to responders to immunotherapy, that has such massive implications globally.
Yeah.
Quality of life, lifespan, all this kind of stuff.
That's a great example, because like it's not that long ago people thought it was a genetic disposition that meant people were responders. So to think that it's actually the microbiome, and by being able to modulate that, you can improve it. To me, it's just
wow.
It's the same. I think if you think about how long ago was it? There was this sort of cesarean births typically have higher levels of asthma,
right,
and other kind of skin conditions, and sort of was like, well, people didn't really understand why that was. And now it's pretty clear. It's because the microbiome is populated during the birth process.
That's it.
And, nature has a way of just knowing and sort of being there for a reason. And I just, for me, in the next 10 years, I think it's a really exciting time to be part of the microbiome.
Right. Yeah. On the analytical side then, and I take the point that we can't go into any specific, client customer detail.
Sure.
I wouldn't push you on that at all, but what are you doing at Arranta to innovate in the analytical side? And do you see that as being like a bedrock foundation of your offering and your business? Like, how do you compete with other CDMOs to make yourselves like, the one that people go to?
Yeah, no, we from really early on, so we obviously acquired Cap Design. So Aaron Cowley, as our CSO, is still with us in the organisation. He did some brilliant work on how do you grow bugs and keep them alive through the manufacturing process. I think if he was here, I could say this. I think there was a little weakness on the analytical side, and actually we brought this guy, Jeff Heiser, on board, who's just like unbelievable.
He was at Boston Analytical, right? Yeah, I've heard him talk a few times.
And his passion for the analytical aspects of microbiome is just brilliant. He's constantly thinking about how does we innovate further on analytical. But for us, one of the early challenges, it's a really simple one, was a lot of the products are consortia. So you're combining 9, 10 different strains into a single drug product capsule. Then how do you make sure you've got the right quantities and all that stuff? And
so do you need to have the same amount by gram weight of every strain in the capsule?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then if you think about that, as you think about for a commercial process, at some point you're going to have to do process validation and show that every time you make it, it's got the same. So
can we just pause there? When you move through development through to commercial, from the manufacturing and analytical perspective, generally speaking, what changes?
I guess the precision of the analytical has to be tighter and tighter and tighter as you go through. We actually still see in a little bit in microbiome, people want to do a lot more on the analytical side earlier. But in general speaking, as you get closer to phase 3 and validation and process characterization, you want to make sure that you really have a strong understanding of what you're doing in the manufacturing process and what the product, all of the the potency, safety, all those attributes are right.
Because I guess when people were watching the vaccines being developed, it was all about phase 1 to phase 3 or phase 2 to phase 3 and getting the data. But I think a lot of people don't realise just what goes into all the rest of the elements. Supply chain. It's
incredible.
Analytical.
Yep.
And you're at Arranta, are you offering an end-to-end solution for your clients?
Lab to commercial. And I think for microbiome companies, what's important is obviously they want to get through phase 1 quickly. Time is money. Everything before phase 2 has a negative net present value. So money's, they want to really go as quickly as possible. But I think what's important to their investors is they have somewhere they can actually manufacture in the future. So the fact that we invested ahead of time
in the capacity.
Yeah, we have phase 3, we've got commercial ready facility, but we have a commercial ready quality management system that was designed that we could take people through to that in the future. Now, most products are in phase 1, phase 2. We don't need that. What we see for microbiome companies increasingly is they kind of go through to phase 2. There's a growing awareness of how important CMC is. There's a lot of people in the sort of preclinical phase 1 who don't fully understand why. We're just to be clear, Arranta is not the cheapest option. We're in the middle of Massachusetts. We talked about it's a $150 million facility that we've got. We're not the cheapest. So we have to spend a lot of time sort of getting people to understand why do we need all these controls? Because we've got to make sure that the product is pure. It doesn't have contamination from any other products and processes. And I think one of the things is probiotics typically are made in multi-use facilities, but they don't have the same controls.
I don't know much about the probiotics industry in terms of who manufactures them and how they manufacture them. My understanding is that, as you say, because it's not a drug product, then the principles of GMP don't apply, although they might embody some quality management.
They would say, they call it food grade GMP.
But it's not, how can you be food grade in GMP?
Well, so it's still, but it's not pharma grade GMP. So they would do less analytical. They would probably do less on the containment.
Just for the listeners, GMP means good manufacturing practice. Yeah. And you're probably better at describing it than I am, but I'll have a shot, having, had some regulatory interactions quite recently. The way I think about it is it's a mindset.
Yeah.
It's a mindset relating to quality, consistency, training, quality management system, making sure that you're producing the right product the same way every single time. And if you don't, you've got to capture that and log it. And ultimately, what it boils down to is patient safety.
Yep.
Making sure that these products are safe for patients every single time.
Yep.
Anything to add as the GMP expert?
I'm lucky I've got much smarter people around me. But,
me too, man.
No, I think that's pretty much it. I think for me, GMP is generally common sense. And I think if you're getting your medicine made somewhere, you want to know, the piece of equipment it was made on wasn't previously made, didn't have a steroid on there that is going to carry over into the product. I think for probiotics, by design, they're just not to the same level. And I think it's funny, Aaron, we asked him about probiotics at the very start, tell us the difference. And he said, well, first of all, if you buy probiotics from the supermarket, you waste your money, because although it's got like 1 billion CFU, all those CFUs are dead. They're not viable.
Wow.
So you're wasting your money on those £50, £50 things.
And by the way, having been to America a couple of times this year and gone to the supermarkets, which are they're huge.
Yep.
The number of probiotics for sale blew my mind.
Yeah.
And it was a very, dare I say, I hope I'm allowed to say this, American way of marketing. We have the most cells in this product, right? They didn't say anything about what the bug was or whether they were viable.
And they're sitting on the shelf. They're not exactly. There's no. Yeah. But even we still find ourselves having to describe that to people, and when we bring employees on,
there's a big difference, right?
That's huge.
Yeah,
it's huge, and I think that's the trick for microbiome is for fermented products certainly, and in fact even for yours, to make sure that the cells are one are alive at the end, and that they hit the right part of the GI tract where they can propagate and grow again. And Yeah, it's not easy. And I think sometimes, I think the industry thinks some of these things are easy, but it's not. I mean, we're running the facility for microbiome the same way as we would run it for mRNA, and the same way we'd run it for a viral vector, which these are types of products that would command significant prices in the commercial market. And microbiome's no different. We have the same controls. In fact, because of the manufacturing complexity and the randomness of when stuff needs to be harvested, in many ways, it's actually more labor intensive.
Right.
And then you're also doing a 5-day lyo cycle at the end as well. So it's definitely not an easy process. It's definitely, we're starting to think about ways to automate some of the manufacturing process.
Where's ripe for innovation in manufacturing and analytical regarding microbiome? You mentioned culture. That's interesting. Plating things up.
Yeah, no, I think
it takes time.
I think one of the things, and we've always had a view on this, but I think we had a lot of business come in at once because we were a new company, and I think we've now got a little bit of breathing space now. We're starting to think about, even within the labs, and I obviously know the folks that work in the labs. I'm not personally in there, but it strikes me when we talk about things that there's a lot of grey space or white space between the activities. And I think for me, the challenge, I think when you think about a new modality, that time is money, an ambition for me would be, it takes about 12 months for us to get something through process development, do the analytical development for products. I'd like to find a way we could cut that down to 6 months. It has to be possible. And I think some of that is on automating technology, so you can do high throughput screening and things. And the second piece is making sure that we fully characterize the proprietary media blends that we have to grow the bugs, the proprietary cryopreservatives, find ways that we can basically create, we can boil some of this down to calculus by saying, this is the strain. I'd love to find a way to use AI in some of that process, that we can sort of design things rather than sort of methodically, manually plating things and sort of seeing what happens. Through to, GMP manufacturing, the biggest bottleneck, which this because you're solving it, is lyophilization.
Right. And that's because
you got to make the bugs inert. You've got to put them back to sleep, make them dormant until they, get into the right part of the GI tract of the patient. And that's a very laborious, long, 5 days. And for us in a facility, we've got 13 clean rooms, 2 lyos. So I can make DS all day, but if I've only got 2 lyos to get it through, that's a constraint. And I think the whole microbiome industry is sort of thinking about that.
Like lyophilization being a bottleneck.
Yeah.
Is it the bottleneck right now for everybody? Who's using it, I suppose? I
think it is.
Probably. So the upstream elements then, like the fermentation, the procurement of the starting material, that's all scalable? You can just, there's bigger fermenters and...
Yeah, no, so there's some constraints there. I think, obviously...
How big are your biggest fermenters? Are you allowed to say that?
Yeah. We got 2,000 litres.
Wow.
And we done a study on 5,000 litres as well, which...
Wow.
So that's sort of only half the problem, though, right? So we can grow large volumes. The biggest problem is that if you think about the gut microbiome, most of the bugs are anaerobic. So
almost all of them.
Yeah.
Right.
So you can, which is one of the reasons that people pick up C. difficile is once the good bugs are exposed to oxygen and through surgery, guess what? Bugs die off. So I think for us. The biggest piece is then the doubt is up. You can grow them, but then how do you harvest them? You got to keep them anaerobic. That's definitely a challenge. And there's different ways. I mean, you could approach it. There's continuous manufacturing and perfusion and things like that. But
so it's like infrastructure and engineering gives you that anaerobic environment.
Correct.
Yeah, certainly at EnteroBiotix, first of all, we're doing manufacturing in-house, as you know.
Yep.
Trying to control the supply chain.
Yeah.
We have made investments into the best quality infrastructure we could possibly afford to give us that anaerobic environment to protect the product.
Yep.
Also the containment to protect the facility and the operators. And as you know, we're trying to solve the lyophilisation challenge through an entirely novel methodology.
Yeah.
We're at the early stages now of trying to scale it up.
Yeah.
But I believe that to be truly successful and to truly hit scale with these microbial products, we're going to have to innovate in that area.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, 5 days feels like a long time, but it's not just the 5-day piece. It's, are there machines big enough to do batches that are big enough for, let's just say for argument's sake, type 2 diabetes?
Yep.
Huge patient population.
Obesity. Yep.
Yeah. And I believe that there's an opportunity there. Metabolic disease, type 2 diabetes, maybe even type 1 diabetes. I'm going to speak about that with someone that's coming on soon. And obesity, possibly. I mean, imagine if instead of eating salad all the time, you gave someone a pill that contained microbes that had been harvested from someone that eats salad all the time. It's quite difficult to get somebody to eat salad all the time.
Well, and you know the whole...
But it's less difficult to take a pill.
But you know the whole theory is that if you feed the bugs cheeseburgers, the bugs that like cheeseburgers grow faster, and they say, hey, I want a cheeseburger.
I want more cheeseburger,
You know, maybe starting to get changed behaviours. I think that's what's surprising to people is the extent to which the microbiome, the bacteria, it's connected to the gut-brain axis, right? The bugs are talking through your vagal nerve back and forward to your brain, right? You know, when you're nervous,
right?
It's a psychological thing, but where do you feel it?
Butterflies in your stomach.
Right? And on a really basic level, I think that's a good example. But, you know, if you eat pizza all the time, guess what? Body wants pizza.
It wants pizza, yeah. More pizza.
But if you could find, and there is, and there's data out there in the public domain of people who have found certain strains that do have a meaningful difference on body fat and body weight.
I've seen that.
You know, so like
it's incredible.
Yeah,
because it feels like in solving, like trying to solve that massive societal challenge, you've got two options. One, somehow get everybody to exercise more, eat less, and clean up their diet more generally. And they've got to do that, by the way, every day for months, and they got to stay
the course
forever.
Yep.
The other option is, and this is hypothetical blue sky, you give them a capsule that contains the microbes harvested from somebody who is doing that, because I mean they exist.
Yep.
I'll put my hand up. I'm obsessed with health, fitness, wellness, my microbiome.
Yep.
And one of the things, and I'm going a bit off piste here, just allow me to indulge myself a little bit. One of the issues is I don't think people understand how good they can feel if they take action and start to focus on their gut health and their microbiome, because they've never felt like that before. They don't understand what it means to have boundless energy all day, feeling strong, fit, healthy, clarity of the brain, all that kind of stuff. Now, I'm going off piste. Now, going back a second, surely we can harvest microbiomes from people who are living that life, scale it, and then give it to people to try and give them some of the benefit of that exercise every day, good diet every day. Now, there's a question there around what kind of clinical study do you need to do?
Yep.
But somebody one day might do it, and companies like Arranta are going to be at the forefront helping them scale that.
Yes.
So you're going to need loads of lyos and loads of fermenters and that kind of thing. So you thinking about that?
We are always thinking about that. No, it's a pretty big challenge, and I think there's different ways to approach it. There's things that won't need lyos, or maybe there's a way to do different cycles that cut that time down to a day rather than 5 days. I think there's definitely ways to there's definitely ways to do it. I look at phase 3 and people commercialising some of these products. These are huge patient populations, and this is what's different from gene therapy. Right. These are huge patient populations.
On gene therapy, there's something very powerful happened recently, wasn't it? Bluebird Bio got an approval. Yeah, Mark, can you get that up? Bluebird Bio. I read about it this morning, actually. I just skim read it, but it looked like there'd been an approval. And that's a big deal because Bluebird have been on a really long journey.
Yeah.
I think just type it into Google and we should see something. There we go. Does it stay there? Okay.
There you go. It would charge 2.8 million.
Oh, wow. Wow. But let us talk about that. How much does it currently cost to treat patients with beta thalassemia over the course of their lifetime? There must be something about that in the article, because they will have worked that out based on what they're likely to get reimbursed. And there we go. People who have thalassemia, 6 hours at a facility every 2 to 4 weeks, sometimes requiring an overnight stay. Okay, so that costs a lot of money. And hey, what they're saying here, I think, is have one shot of this and you never need to go back into that facility again for the rest of your life. Yep. Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredible. There'll be something around pricing, and maybe I can do a separate piece on that. But I think that the $2.8 million will have been very carefully thought through and will be deemed through the various different means and mechanisms.
And that's what's cool about the gene therapy products. They're curing.
They're curing. One-shot cures. So somebody will have done the maths to say this is value for money. Mark, maybe you can have a quick look and I'll just keep chatting to Dave, but there'll be something in there about how can they justify that cost, and it will relate to how much it costs society and the healthcare systems for one patient over the course of their lifetime. Because not only are they saving money, they're also, there we go. Okay. Wow. Okay. So 6.4 versus 2.8. So there's a saving there, and there's also a massive quality of life piece.
And to be fair, it'd be interesting to know how much money Bluebird Bio has invested to get to this point.
Right. And there's also, and people don't think about this, I guess, is there's the costs if they're working with a CDMO.
Yep.
There's all the manufacturing costs. I mean, you're a business. You need to make money, right?
We just want to make a reasonable, sustainable rate of return for our investor. That's it. We're not
right.
I have that discussion with customers. We're not trying to make 50% margins. We're just trying to make sure that we are a sustainable business that can reinvest in the facility and the equipment.
Trying to get product to patient and create a sustainable, commercially viable company.
Yep.
I mean, on that point, what is your vision for ArrantaBio? You're the CEO. You didn't start as CEO.
I did not.
Mark Bam first started the company. Then there was a merger.
2019, Mark started the company right after Pharma.
I remember when they were planning. They were doing something in the microbiome.
No. And
what are you guys doing? Tell me. Because I'm doing a microbiome thing. And then they started it. It's kind of cool. And should we just pay some homage or lip service to Mark's naming sort of conventions?
It's
Glamour, Arranta, Gallus.
Yep.
He's also got ThermBio now.
Yep.
And I think Morag deserves the credit for that, doesn't she?
Chief Naming Officer, I understand, is her title.
Shout out to Morag. Okay, so go back then to your vision for Arranta and the history. I think it's kind of interesting story.
Yeah, no, we so initially, it's funny actually, when I was at AMRI at the time, I actually moved to the US with the AMRI to run their steriles division, and it felt like the right time to do something else. And I wasn't really actively looking, but I was sort of starting to think about what I wanted to do next. And I got a phone call from Ian Baird. Ian I'd known for 10 years. In fact, I'd known him for 10 years, but I'd always assumed he didn't like me. So, and you can relate to that, I'm sure. So when he phoned me up, he said,
Ian Baird, tough customer, but firm but fair.
He's a good fellow.
He very much knows what he's doing. So Arranta's been an incredible journey for me. He phoned me up and he didn't have a job for me. I mean, I said, well, what's it doing? He said, no, just come and meet Mark. And I didn't know Mark. I'd heard of him because of Brahma, and I think I once passed him in a corridor, and I remember seeing him. And I went online and looked him up, and there was a lot of articles about his sort of values as a leader in a company, and how he thought about swinging for the fences. And you can see he's done extremely well with all his ventures, but that's because he's by nature he's bold and he's forward thinking, and he sees opportunity where other people see risk, kind of what we talked about, and he goes for it. But I think what's most the thing that most impresses you with Mark is, for all his success, he's like humility. He's just so humble.
Yeah, and so he I really enjoyed the first time I met him. Still didn't know what the job was. Then I talked to Ian a couple of times, and I said, Ian, what's the job? And he said, oh, well, could be CEO. I'm thinking, wow, I hadn't thought of that at all. I thought, and so, Mark had always planned to sort of set the company up and step back, but he didn't want to step back. And then we had a lot of inbound interest in the company last year, particularly when we started to look at mRNA. We were not actively looking to sell the company. We built a really great organization. We have a group of talent at Arranta that I've never worked with before. And I was able to recruit people from even customers that I'd worked with in the past. People that, honestly, when I phoned them up, and it's like, would you ever consider joining a CDMO, and thinking they'll just knock me back? But people I really enjoyed working with and respected, former colleagues, customers. And so it was brilliant. It was like sort of building a dream team to work with. And then I had, Ian helping me on some of the setting the facility up. Mark doing what Mark does. People were fascinated to see what he was doing, so it was easy to get in to see people.
And what was the ethos when you were building? Was it like, let's buy the best possible kit,
yep,
and the best technology, and let's hire the best people and just be the best? Is that essentially?
It was pretty much it. It was so refreshing, because it was not like, how do we skirt around? In terms of the value creation that we have for customers, the equipment, the facilities, there was no expense spared. And if you've seen,
I've been.
And people walk around and they go, wow, this is pretty amazing.
It is.
And so that's what we wanted. And what's really nice about that, and I've been involved in companies before where you've got old equipment, old assets, old facilities, and you're sort of working around them. What was neat was being able to go blank piece of paper and walk in and say, we can do all these things. And I felt really confident in what we were saying to people.
Because you got the capability.
Yeah.
We've been the same at EnteroBiotix. We are buying the best possible kit, the best kit. And our people who work at the company say, look, this is incredible. We've got this state-of-the-art equipment. We can do so much with this. And they're excited about it. So there's also an element of the people that are working for you being drawn to do more and more, and they tell their friends, we're buying the best kit here. But yeah, I mean, from Mark and Ian, I think if you're not first and the best, then why are you doing it?
Yeah, Ian's philosophy on that
you're
stuff.
Last.
He just doesn't cut corners at all. And so no, it's been a brilliant, and it's funny because AMRI and my previous company, I had a whole division. I had about 700 people in that division. You become closeted, right? And I was still talking to customers, but you're not sort of making things happen as much as you probably did, and some of it's dealing with politics more than it's sort of. And that was one of the things. I was sitting in meetings. I'm not speaking ill, but they just, for me, we weren't talking about customers and we weren't talking about employees and how to grow the business. That's sort of all you do in a startup, right? And how do we grow this? I think the mRNA example is a brilliant one. We pivoted and jumped into that. Like, one board meeting, we want to do this.
Boom.
Yeah.
We're doing it. And we're doing it big.
And so obviously I'm now the CEO of Arranta. Also, just recently, we were acquired by Recipharm, which is a Swedish company. Global, I think the 5th largest CDMO in the world.
Wow.
Interesting philosophy that they'd like us to sort of run and keep doing what we're doing. Obviously grow and hit some of the numbers that we've committed to, which is absolutely fine and appreciated. But we were also acquired at the same time by Probiotics, which was also an ampersand company. And so I'm now the
ampersand who's that? Sorry, they're the
private equity,
the backers of both companies.
Yep.
Okay.
And Ian helped set some of the facilities up in the US for them. They actually have a slightly different legacy. They've been for 15 years plus manufacturing oncolytic virus for treating cancer.
Very interesting.
And viral vectors. They have a site in Germany, really good people, profitable business, and they were looking to add a US site to commercialize those types of products. Again, it's a new modality. And then most recently, I've been asked to be the CEO of that company as well, which It's cool.
Very cool.
Exciting.
Very, very cool.
For me, I feel incredibly lucky to get to lead organizations and people. I don't take it for granted. I think part of that is I worked my way up literally from the very bottom. So I know I've had some really good leaders I've worked for. I've worked from bad ones, and I've tried to remember how I felt. And so I feel incredible privilege, honor.
What does being a leader mean to you? Mm-hmm. And also a good one? What makes a good leader a good leader?
It's funny, I've actually got more and more comfortable over the years of just being myself, not trying to be someone else that I used to, someone else I thought I needed to be. I think sincerity, humility, empathy, I think those are the characteristics of a good leader. I think someone who stretches the ambitions of the organisation, and that's not by just sort of saying, hey, we want to be the best. It's making sure that there's actions in place and resources and the financial support to make sure that you can actually realise those things. I can't remember, I read it, but it's not... what I saw for years and years was budgets set in companies and CDMOs without ever really sitting down and going, what's the how? And so I really pride myself in making sure I understand and that we've got a plan for delivering. If we say it's driven by this, then make sure we understand what that driver is. But I think that for me, the most important part of a leader is being a human being and relating to people. I think the challenge for any leader is to get people to go places they don't think they can go or want to go. The only way you can do that is for them to trust you. There's no other recipe as far as I can tell. And I think I try really hard just to be like, I think I've said this, I did another podcast a while back, and I'm convinced there's only 3 or 4 decisions in my life that are different from me and the people who work in the organisation. There's just, I'm fortunate. I've had some combination of luck, but also saying yes to opportunities. When Mark offered me the job at Arranta, I think Ian he sort of admired me for the way I did it, but I think he thought I'd lost my mind a little bit. I never looked at the contract and I signed it. I didn't talk about salary. I didn't talk about any of those things. Generally speaking,
dare I say you had a gut feeling? A good gut feeling?
I had a good feeling, but I was more excited about if I go build a great business with Mark Bamforth, everything will be okay. And like I say, I'm not quite in the position where I don't have to care about those things. Obviously the financial things, all those things, but I knew that Mark was a good person, but I really wanted the opportunity, and that was more important to me than haggling over things.
I'll tell you something I've not told you before. I had a curry with those 2 gentlemen and others when they were trying to bring you in, or I think they just brought you in. Curry, a couple of pints, Union Street, Aberdeen.
Uh-huh.
And I remember they said, we've got the right guy. We managed to get him. And then they said who you were. Scottish boy, over in the US, big ambition, big capability, all the people skills, and they were really comfortable with that. So you must have done something to really impress them.
No,
not sure about signing a contract without reading it. But
that's actually true. I actually had cause to read it not that long ago. But no, I think.
Oh man,
I wanted the opportunity to work with Mark and Ian, and
I understand that for sure. You want to be the best you can be. You need to surround yourself with the best people all the time, and be a bit selfish about it. I want to be with the best to become the best.
I think as you get older, not that I'm a sage. Man,
there's some grey hairs on this beard now, and even with all my longevity stuff, you can't see it on the camera, thankfully, but they're they're coming, man.
But I think if you're going to spend 5 years of your life on something, you got to make sure it's something that you're going to put your heart and soul into and that you believe in. And I think, it's just, I feel immensely proud when I rock up to Watertown every time I drive in there. I can't explain it. I don't feel I don't feel any different to other people there. I have all the same normal insecurities everybody else does. And I just feel immensely proud. And I see how hard people work in the company and how smart the folks are. And I feel unbelievably humble that they're willing to work for me.
There's something so humbling about people working, and I say for you, but on the same team as you, who are coming in early, leaving late, working the weekends, putting the big shift in because they believe in your vision and they believe in what the organization's doing.
Yep.
It's the most incredibly fulfilling, super cool thing.
Yep.
One of the best parts of being a leader, isn't it? Seeing people reach their potential and seeing how hard people are prepared to work for the vision that you've set is just special. It's really special.
I think that's the thing I take the greatest pride in, is the people whose career has been influenced by me. And I think that's an enormous responsibility for anybody who's in a position to lead an organization, is to make sure, and by the way, I'm certain I don't get it right all the time. So I'm sure there's people listening who will go,
likewise.
But I think generally trying to get more things right than wrong. And I think it's a really subtle thing, but the thing I'm most proud of is when I lead by just influence, that people do the right thing without having to be pushed. I can't tell you like that. That is a rare and rare commodity, that people will generally push in the same direction without being forced in those directions. I think that's the kind of people I want to work with. And we want to be a mission-driven organization. And I think it's really tough because you still have all the normal objectives. You still have to hit them. But I think I want everyone to have the same fire in the belly, that we're trying to create something really neat.
So where will Arranta be in 3 years, 5 years? What's coming?
Yeah. Well, I think so.
Vibrologics.
Vibrologics.
Because you're doing them both.
Well, and in Recifarm, right? I think there's an interesting thing. I think Recifarm has a pretty firm vision of where they want to get to. They're backed by EQT, one of the largest private equity companies in the world. They're going through their own transformation. But I think for us,
what do Recifarm want to achieve? Like, what's their vision? They want to be the biggest?
No,
they want to be
the best in class.
They want to be the best in class.
No, I think,
why not?
I think they want to be the one of the most differentiated global CDMOs, and I think
that explains the microbiome,
yes,
the advanced therapies, advanced technologies, mRNA, because these are the therapies of the future.
Yep. So Mark Funk is the CEO of Recifarm. He was previously the CEO of Lonza, probably one of the biggest. Yeah. He had a tremendous success building up their biologics division.
I heard that.
There's a number of other ex-Lonza people there, but I think they're sort of reflected in what they saw at Lonza, which Lonza are a phenomenally successful company, and be proud to ever be associated with them. But I think more and more what you're seeing is a lot of the innovation for new medicine is not coming from big pharma necessarily. It's coming from there's a much greater democratization of drug development. People have small companies. Bluebird is an example.
Right.
That innovation is coming through smaller companies, and so I think of course they're going to look after big pharma companies, but I think there is an opportunity to look after mid-sized companies, small companies, virtual companies in a different way, where in some of these larger companies, for sure, they get lost on the margins. There's just no doubt. And I think if I think about Vibrologics and Arranta, I think when you think about viral vectors, oncolytic viruses, microbiome, mRNA, plasmids, that's advanced therapeutics, it's advanced ATMPs, and I think we have an opportunity where that's not a well-served segment of the market. So for in my mind,
what do you mean by that? Sorry, well-served?
Well, so if you think about even companies like Lonza and Thermo, Catalent, sure, they can offer sterile fill finish, they can offer gene therapy, but is there anyone offering microbiome, all of these brand new advanced medicinal therapeutic areas? I think there's an opportunity to really learn, because each of them has similar challenges, right? Even though they're pretty different. the microbiome regulatory pathway is completely not defined.
And it's changing.
Yes.
There's some changes happening in the EU
Yeah.
as we speak.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
And the same thing for oncolytic viruses. So there's things that we can do to send that learning curve faster. There's things like facility sharing, there's expertise sharing. There's an opportunity for us to really build something which a lot of the characteristics of people in those areas, you'll see on our website, it's bold. And the reason we picked
Mark,
it...
can we pull that up? Let's have a look at the Arranta website. Here we go.
I think if you...
homepage, please. I think homepage says it. It's in big writing.
There you go.
There we go. Boom. Bold.
And that was one of our sort of overarching core values as an organisation. We're bold. We're jumping into areas of manufacturing that are not well developed.
There's a facility too. Look at that. Wonderful. You hiring right now?
We're always hiring.
Always hiring. There we go. So...
yeah,
it's really good.
So, I think
it's a great facility, and it's a great company you're building.
And you know this, like for your company, EnteroBiotix, it's brand new, right? You have to, by the time you speak to investors, you have to explain, I'm sure, why, the wherefores and whatnots of microbiome, which by definition means that you've got to be bold, intrepid, which is the meaning of Arranta, and that's...
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a
Gaelic word, yeah.
Bold and intrepid.
Wow. It's cool.
Yeah, Morag's pretty good at this.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah.
But no, and I think we see ourselves being the same as our customers in that respect. And that's why I keep saying we're highly indexed. And it's funny when I talk to CEOs of some of our clients, and I'm talking to one this afternoon.
You got some customers in the UK?
Actually, I'm talking to one from the West Coast who you was on holiday, but we still have to talk today. But I think...
Well, Dave, thanks for coming in on your holiday, man. Yeah. It's been a great conversation, but keep going. Yeah.
No, and I think that's... If they're successful, we'll be successful. And if they're not successful, we won't be. And so...
That's it.
we don't want to be transactional. We're not looking to just, work through work stages. We want to make sure that we're adding value and trying to think 10 steps ahead so we can give you the best possible chance of success.
You want to partner.
Yeah.
Partner with every single company to help them. Great. Dave, we're pretty much at 1:00. So I'm happy to leave it there.
Perfect.
Hopefully that's good timing for you.
I thought 2 hours was going to be a long time, but that went pretty quickly.
No, I think Mark, you'll know, I think it's an hour 40 minutes, something like that, roughly. Hour and 23, yeah. So that's awesome. Dave, thanks so much, man.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, really, really good. To learn more about the guests on today's episode or more about the Inside Matters podcast, please visit insidematters.health. Thank you.